According to PEN America, Charles, Texas leads the nation in banned books in public schools in America. Over 800 books have been banned in Texas that are not accessible to school children all the way to the age of high school students. And most of these banned books, over 90% of them, are not even books that are required reading. These are just books that you have a right to go to the library and choose to select to read. And one of our most prominent black authors, Sister Toni Morrison, she's had more than one book banned here in Texas because they have a problem with her writings being too black conscious, in my opinion, and revealing the truth of America's dirty history when it comes to race, particularly in the South. What I don't like about this is we're attempting to censor history, rewrite history and whitewash it to some degree, and misinform and miseducate the Texas students about the truth of America's history, and give Texas students a wide frame of reference of knowledge that they could choose from and make their own educated, conscious decision. I thought that's what they did in China. I thought that's what they did in Russia. I thought that's what they did in North Korea. So America should stop throwing the rock at communist governments about censorship of academic material and denying the citizens access to all book forms of knowledge, because America's doing the same thing right here at home.
So you saw on the conservative side of the fence, what ignited this new push was a change in Texas, a change in how parents can object to books that was spearheaded by Governor Abbott. But also you had the whole debacle here in Houston with the trans story time, and you had drag queens reading books. It turns out one of them was a registered sex offender. You've had that happen everywhere else. You've had all these protests, and it's come down to this attempt to limit access to knowledge, and I think it's very short-sighted. You talk about Toni Morrison, her book, The Bluest Eye, was banned here in Texas, and that's horrifying. It's about a child not seeing beauty in the mirror because of the way beauty was framed a few decades ago as being Caucasian beauty, and she wished she had blue eyes. And how that book could ever be banned is beyond me. On the flip side, you've seen the left in other states, right, ban books like Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer for their use of a word.
Banned Malcolm X,
right.
too.
You've seen the Bible banned. You've seen other things banned. And for me, I think it's idiocy, right? As a young child, for me, and I've always been very successful academically without a lot of effort, and it was tied to being exposed to books at a very young age. That's where I fled to when my parents got divorced. I had an aunt who I was very close to die when I was 6, and it was early reading that gave me an escape, and it gives kids an escape today when we see discipline evaporating. We see no consequence for violence in public schools, honors programs, which are under attack by the left, and libraries, which are under attack by the right, are often the vehicle of escape for high-performing, high-achieving students. We've also seen studies. Right now, we're in this paradigm in America where there are very different admissions requirements at elite schools for Hispanic applicants and African American applicants.
And it should be.
Against white and Asian applicants.
And it should be.
And I would disagree. And I think the math is the reason we say it should be, right, is because you see on demographic basis is you see holistically a higher performance by Asian applicants and white applicants, and some of that is defined.
No, that's where you're wrong. The reason
privilege.
why it's like that, Charles, is because for over 360 years in America, it was against the law for a black man, woman, or child to even read a book. And if a black man, woman, or child was caught reading a book, the law in the South was you would gouge out their eyes and hang them from a tree, because the slave masters of the South and around the country did not want their slaves to know how to read. And so academically, we were disadvantaged. I remember my grandmother telling me that when she went to school as a young girl, they got the second hand-me-down books from the white students, and when they would get those books, some of the pages would be ripped out, some of the pages would be wrote all over. They couldn't even read the book correctly, but yet they were still expected to academically perform at the same rate and stage as their white counterparts. And remember, segregation in this country academically was real. That's why we had Brown versus the Board of Education, separate but equal. No, it was separate and unequal, and that's why we had to change academic excellence and the standards of it in America, because the system purposely, written in law, miseducated black students and black people. So that's why we have some of these preferences that are in place to help black students go to some of these prestigious universities. Take Harvard University. Black folks couldn't go to Harvard, but it was financed by the invention of a black man, Jan Metzenlinger, who invented the soles of shoes and put it together. They took his invention, sold it, and financed the inception of Harvard University. So yes, there's a reason why that's in place.
Well, Quanell, I think we're having an argument that you didn't allow me to make my final point that we might not necessarily be having. I don't think that race should be the math, right? I think you should look beyond that to socioeconomics and other things, right? I also don't think we should have legacy admissions, right? And I think we need to have more equitable policies to look. But when you look at just the math of race, it's suggesting, and there's this performance gap. And the argument is that Hispanic and African American kids can't achieve at the same rate as Asian and white kids. And that's not true, right? When you look at real numbers, everyone's just as smart and just as dumb as everyone else. Skin color has no basis for competence. And there's been studies that say the achievement gap is absolutely eliminated by early reading, by getting books in the hand. You're absolutely right about the legacy, the educational legacy of not just slavery, but Jim Crow is massive, right? But what we've got to do is find solutions to get to fairness. And what we're saying right now is we're giving all these schools a pass, right? Well, you know, these crumbling public schools are just doing nothing, right? And it's both the left and the right that are failing these students, but books are at the core. And for the right-wing conservatives to be pulling books, and there are some inappropriate books, they have already talked about masturbation and other things that don't need to be in an elementary school, but who cares if they're in a high school? But ultimately, it should be the parents,
but you
right?
Said something
it should
that was
be
very
the
powerful.
parents.
You said something that was powerful, that studies have proven that early childhood reading brings balance.
Makes all the difference.
Brings a great balance
right.
to academic achievement in the long run.
Right.
And I remember, Charles, when I was a young boy, I grew up in a very gang, drug-infested community.
Right.
And I loved to read, but I could never tell anybody. I used to love to read books. I was fascinated with reading books about UFOs, atomic energy, the nuclear wars, Japan, America, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. I was infatuated with reading about alien life form, etc. when I was a young fourth grade kid. And I remember my teacher told me, she said, "You're so brilliant, you have such a vast knowledge of things. You must go to the library all the time." I said, "No, I do not. I check the books out." And I would take the books, Charles, put them under my shirt, and stick them on my pants and cover them up when I walked home, because in my community, if you were seen walking home with a book in your hand like that, some cats would really prey upon you and treat you like you were a nerd and you were a punk. And so we in my community, in all communities, I think we should listen carefully to what you said. Early childhood reading is the key. Because of so much that I read, Charles, I was able to overcome in many ways the sincere adversities I faced as a child in my own community because I love to read. So you had a valid point there.
Well, you also, Dolly Parton, people look at her from our generation as this big-breasted country western singer and actress who was very famous in the 80s, lots of hits, wrote Whitney Houston's greatest hit, but people don't realize she has bought hundreds of millions of books for kids, distributing them all over the world, because she recognizes, and that's what we should be doing. We have all this bitter infighting, right? And we have this right-wing theocracy conservative that just wants to silence, but you also have presentism on the left, where they see a book like To Kill a Mockingbird and they want to pull it off the shelves despite the fact that it talks about injustice and racism. You talk about Samuel Clemens, who wrote as Mark Twain. His books have been pulled off shelves across America and in liberal areas because of their use of that horrifying word. But if you actually read Tom Sawyer or Huck Finn, it is at its essence not a book about a rascally kid. They are both books about the need for abolition in the South.
But what I want to see is more black and brown children reading books that are required reading in the public school systems of America, written by authors who look like them. Charles, I grew up in the public school system, and I cannot recall not one time where a book of required reading in English, social study, or science or in history was written by a black author. And the reason why so many young black boys and girls don't really trust and believe in academic excellence and education is because they can't see successful people like themselves giving them the material that's required reading to study from. So I'm hoping that we should stop banning books, period. Let these children read all of these books and make academic conscious decisions. But liberals nor conservatives should set the standards of what books should be read by our children. And I disagree with the drag queen reading hour. I disagree with it, because if we're going to have drag queen reading hour, are we going to have Muslim reading hour? Are we going to have Buddhist reading hour? Hindu reading hour? Are we going to have
drag
trans
queens
bi
aren't
reading
a
hour?
religion.
Are we going to have polygamy reading hour? See, that's the problem with that. Everybody wants to have their own special hour, our own special day, at the expense of others. If we're going to recognize one and let one do it, then all got to do it.
Well, see, I would say, look, drag queens give a great performance. That's why they're drag queens.
I've never been to a drag show, but it looks like you may have.
They give a great performance, and if the children like it and the parents are okay with it, and they're not a registered sex offender, I think parents should make whatever choice they do. It turns out in New York, however,
but it should
hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax dollars were being paid to these organizations to have these hours.
And I have a problem with that, because it has to be inclusive for everybody if you do it for one.
I have a problem with wasting tax dollars, but I have a more problem with burning books. And I don't think we should allow all books. We have to have some sort of standards, but they should be regimented standards that apply across the board. We're not seeing that. Almost all the books being banned are LGBT books or black author books.
But I'm going to tell you what I would like to see. You know, right here in Texas, we've been building $80 million and $90 million football stadiums.
It's insane.
High school football stadiums. I would love to see a board approve $10 million or $15 or $20 million to go strictly to teacher bonuses and raises, to be put out over a 5-year period, because too many teachers are severely overworked and underpaid and underappreciated.
Their ability to discipline kids. I mean, we ought to
That's
make
a whole nother
safer,
discussion,
but
because not just teachers, hell, they need to give parents back the ability to discipline their children, because not only can the teacher not discipline the children, the parents at home, if they discipline them, here comes CPS want to take your children from them, and then here comes the CPS worker, 9 times out of 10 who don't have children of their own, overworking, severely underpaid themselves, fabricating paperwork, stealing people's children. Hell, let parents not abuse their kids, but let parents have the right to discipline their children. And I have no problem with corporal punishment. But you know why they took that out, right? Because when integration took place, they didn't want black teachers whooping little white children when they had school integration.
I would disagree that that's the reason.
Oh, that's why they took it out.
You what,
they didn't want Grandma Beulah and Aunt Irene spanking little Becky and little Johnny.
I think you can agree that Pops kept both of us in line, and Pops.
It sure did.
If you were afraid of that,
I didn't play with my coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Because our English teacher, my math teacher, Miss Cox, all she had to say, I'll call Coach Burleson.
So we all got
more
books in kids' hands, more discipline, a better America. We agree.
And raise teacher pay to a respectable living wage. That's what needs to happen in America. Look, Biden, just take some of that money you send into Ukraine. That ain't got a damn thing to do with us. And take that money for one damn rocket and give it toward teachers' salaries in one state, and watch your approval rating shoot through the roof.
Or what? How about $500 billion you're spending on giving people money so they don't have to pay back in loans? Instead, why don't you divert it to making kids' educations better, or maybe making junior college or in-state
Well, first of all, I believe
that
a college education should be free in America.
Yeah, we should be doing something.
It should be free in America. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, brother. If we can spend $2 or $3 trillion in Afghanistan and Iraq,
right,
we don't have enough money to take care of education of our young people in this country, who are our future brightest minds, to lead this country in a better direction for a better tomorrow.
We need to do something.
I agree.
So America all remembers the raid that wasn't a raid on the former president's residence in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, looking for documents. And that is proceeding with a special master in court, and there is some suggestion there may be an indictment. Today we had a news conference from the Attorney General of the state of New York, Letitia James, who has filed a civil action against the Trump organization for seeking $250 million, alleging that they fabricated the valuation of property and assets to their benefit in tax situations and when seeking loans. It was big news, and it's something that the Attorney General has been working on since she ran for office, because she expressly campaigned as she was going to get Donald Trump. And of course, I take issue with any law enforcement official campaigning on how they're going to get someone, right? We don't want weaponize criminal justice in this country. And it's very clear that there is an effort to put Trump in a certain manner that'll prevent him from challenging Joe Biden in the next election. We're also seeing this with Governor Ron DeSantis with his movement of migrants from Texas to Florida to Martha's Vineyard. The San Antonio sheriff is opening an investigation on criminal allegations against the governor of Florida, and there has been a civil action filed in Boston today seeking money from the state of Florida for violating the civil rights of the migrants. But it's very clear that a lot of this is happening to prevent DeSantis from running against Biden. In fact, the New York Times has just framed him as a greater danger to America. We just saw a 41-year-old man kill an 18-year-old kid because he felt like he was a conservative. We have seen just across the board this kind of anger. And we see it from conservatives, too.
Charles,
we see marching with torches and libtard and everything.
Let me
and
say
at
this.
some point, we need to stop politicizing this and return to democracy.
Charles,
I think this is a waste of time.
America is being ripped apart at its core.
Right, true.
In fact, if we continue to pursue the direction that we're pursuing in this nation, whether you call yourself liberal or conservative, whether you call yourself independent, etc., the political machinations and political games and tricks in America has caused the American people by overwhelming numbers to lose faith in government. And what we don't want to see is a politically weaponized criminal justice system to
well,
where,
we've seen
to
that
where
in
criminal,
America
to where criminal
for
prosecutions are politically motivated.
Right.
And I hope and pray that Ms. James, the New York AG, is not doing this because she has future political aspirations, but I tend to believe that that is part of the motive why she's filed this suit against Donald Trump. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, the American people must send a message to our government leaders, our elected officials. They were elected by the people to be servants of the people, but they look at us as being servants of them. We have to send a message, Charles, take the country back. Because if the people don't collectively do something about the political tricks that are being played solely based on party interests and party direction, then what we're going to have in America is civil discourse and civil unrest to where common men and women are fighting each other physically and harming each other physically solely based on the political games and aspirations of politicians. Because I believe all of this politically motivated, but here's a mistake that Ms. James and others are making about Donald Trump. The personal attacks on Donald Trump is not going to defeat him. They've already tried that on 2 separate occasions to destroy the man with personal attacks. It's not going to do it. You have to defeat Donald Trump with the platform. You have to defeat him on his policies. That's how you defeat Donald Trump. And if you don't go at him with that, you thinking the personal attacks from the Democratic side against him is going to destroy him, it's going to only make him stronger. Because the people that's behind Trump and Mr. Trump himself understands that every knock is a boost. And what they're doing is giving him more credibility with his base and causing independents who are looking at some of the real issues like the economy, who are looking at what's happening with America's teacher shortage, who's looking at the food shortage across America. They see real legitimate issues, Charles, and we have to get back to what is in the best interest of this nation, not what's in the best interest of politicians. That's what's causing America's downfall.
Well, you see, in Houston specifically, inflation is worse than in most other places in the country. You're seeing groceries spike like 17%. Obviously, gasoline in California is still in the $6 range, and it's crushing working people. But what I really think that a lot of people, we're allowing Donald Trump to become a martyr. We're allowing conservatives to become a martyr when you have the president condemning so many people. We have a whistleblower inside the FBI saying that child sex trafficking and pedophiles, where the resources dedicated to that were reduced to focus on investigating conservative organizations that they are framing as the biggest threat. But really, there's this hypocrisy. Like if Trump did something wrong or his organization did something wrong, I think they should be held to account. The January 6th insurrectionists, I mean, the people that were violent with the police officers and stormed in there and tore stuff up, I think they should be held to account. But you also have Trump's charity that Letitia James went after and exposed some corruption. But Joe Biden had a cancer charity that raised millions of dollars for cancer research. $0 went to cancer research. It all went to salaries. There was never any investigation. Joe Biden on 60 Minutes is talking about how he has no issue with his son's international business dealings. And we don't see, and so with the insurrectionists, you see them held to account. During Trump's inauguration, when he was elected, Washington, D.C. was on fire. Things were tore up, people were vandalized, cars were burned, people were arrested. All of those cases were dismissed. In the Pacific Northwest, in Portland, you see these cases being dismissed up to trial. The two lawyers during the civil rights protests in New York that firebombed a police vehicle and passed out Molotov cocktails, they had entered a plea agreement, and we're looking at 10 years. The Biden administration came in and withdrew that, and it's working out a sweetheart deal with them. And what we want is we want fairness. Now, the Republicans weren't interested in fairness for decades, right? When we have this overly biased war on drugs, but neither was Joe Biden. You remember all the super predator nonsense
let
in
me
the
say
crap.
this.
And
Joe
what we want as Americans is to fix stuff.
Joe Biden is a Johnny-come-lately friend to the black community. Because if you really look at Joe Biden's history, Joe Biden was not a friend of black people.
No,
in fact, Joe Biden said some very racist comments and very racist things about the black community and black leadership in particular.
Especially
and Joe Biden was one of the strongest pushers and backers of the crime bill that criminalized an entire 3 generations of young black men and had no problem with it, and later apologized because it was politically expedient so he could run for president and get the black vote. That's why I keep saying to you, Charles, it is true that during those protests,
but when is
a lot of bad
Republicans
things
going to
happen.
reach out to black America, or when is black America going to push back at the Democratic Party?
When
is white America going to reach out and say, hey, we need a more moderate country?
The Republican Party has to stop ignoring the black community.
Most certainly.
The Republican Party, you must have the testicular fortitude to come sit down with black people and speak to them directly face to face and tell them what your agenda is. Then we make a conscious and educated decision of what we want to do. But I'm going to tell you what is happening. This is what I don't like. I don't like one political party thinking that they have the power to tell black people who in the hell we should listen to. I don't have a problem with one political party telling black people who we can be friends with, who we can talk to on the other side of the aisle. The Democratic Party don't tell that to no other race of people in America but black people. They control in their mindset who we talk to and who we speak to on the other side of the aisle. We as a black nation and the black community have the sole right of the Akuji Chagalia, the right to self-determination. We pick and choose who we talk to and where we talk to them and when we talk to them. So when we get away from that master-slave relationship and become an independent thinking people, then a whole lot of this was changed. I think that black people should be more independent than Democrat or Republican.
Well, I think that goes not just for African Americans. I think it goes for all Americans. There's a lot of
No, the Democratic Party don't feel like that for nobody else but us.
No, I'm saying that all Americans need to start looking past the prism of the partisan and look to politicians that are actually going to fix the issues that are in front of them. And I'm not saying this that I think the Republicans are fixing issues, because obviously they're failing on so many grounds, or the Democrats. But we have so many people that just assume support and do nothing. And I also think that our mainstream media and our major political parties want us distracted. They want us angry about things that they can't change. You see Biden tweeting a couple weeks ago, he's going to end cancer as we know it, right? Just like it's charity. That's something he's not going to do. It's just something he can bleat about, because as we're collapsing under the weight, Republicans keep them angry about abortion instead of fixing the economy.
It's something that he says to inspire the base to get out for the midterms, like the Democratic president.
That's what that $20,000 handout to rich educated people was.
And let me say this to American people: the pharmaceutical powers of America, the real drug dealers, will not allow Joe Biden to make no cure for cancer. Because trust me, the real power in America are your pharmaceutical drug companies and your military contractors. That's the real power. But what I'm hoping, Charles, is that we become a better base of educated voters, all races in this country. And I believe it's time, Charles, for a third party. I really do. The two-party idea in America has outlived its usefulness.
It
is time for a third party, and all of us should consider investigating a third party.
Well, I also think we should start demanding that our criminal justice system, we've seen it. Ken Paxton, RAG here, looking at an indictment for years long. He's weaponized his position to go after political opponents, just like Letitia James is. And that's the thing. I don't like hypocrisy anyway, right? And that was people that sit in the middle and throw darts at both sides, you're condemned, right? Oh, both sides aren't equal. You know, Republicans tell you that Democrats are all evil, and Democrats tell you Republicans are all evil. Hell, the president tried to say all Republicans are evil a couple of weeks ago. But at the end of the day, us regular Americans, we want public safety. We want good, safe schools. We want taxes as low as possible, but we want some services. We want a safety net, but we don't want to just tell homeless criminal monsters that they can have whatever they want and take over our public spaces. We want inflation not to be out of control. We want an America that works for those of us that work. But right now, America works for people, whether they're super rich and lazy and got their hand out, or they're super lazy with no money and have their hand out.
Most of our homeless people are really homeless because of mental health problems.
No, they're homeless because of drug addiction.
But as a result,
and laziness.
At the root cause of it is mental health problems. And a lot of those men and women are not really just lazy. A lot of those men and women suffer from some undiagnosed and untreated mental health problems that are generational. And so what you see is the after effects of that, and you think you see monsters and laziness when you're dealing with people, men who are just mentally broken, and we put no real money into mental health problems in this country. America has spent so much money in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Ukraine.
But that's not true.
But America won't spend money to take care of its own citizens' real problems.
We have a multi-billion-dollar industry right now, right? In housing homeless because of this alleged right to shelter, which doesn't exist anywhere in the Constitution. But what it's really doing is we're taking billions of tax dollars across this country. We're paying it to hotel owners. We're paying it to people that open non-profits that open these facilities.
The rich
They're all getting rich, and many homeless don't want it. We need a safety net for struggling families, people who lost their jobs, people that are down and out. But what we don't need is this permanent system that's costing all of us billions of dollars and reducing services for participating Americans. We need to get back to an America that works for the Americans that get up and go to damn work every day. Our parks need to be safe, not overrun with methed out drug addicts that are attacking people.
What we don't want is what we see in Los Angeles.
Oh, it's horrible. San Francisco,
what we don't want
horrible.
Is
New
what's
York,
happening in California.
Horrible.
And in fact, that's coming and it's going to spread across the country.
Well, it's already here.
If the wisest and the most intelligent minds don't sit down and come up with real solutions to that problem, because homelessness is unbelievable in Los Angeles, California. Shocking.
Go drive
I'm from Los
Montrose
Angeles,
right
and
now.
I had no idea it would look like that.
If you go drive around Montrose right now, where I live, people are terrified. My wife doesn't want to walk the dog anymore because crime is so palpable, and it's all associated with people that are just setting up tents and taking over, breaking into cars. And this is not a holistic condemnation of all homeless, but what we have just in Los Angeles, they raided one of the camps a couple days ago, got all kind of guns, got hundreds of thousands of pills of fentanyl. They're basically, this is a criminal organization. You have people in the Pacific Northwest, in Portland, who can't get the cops to respond, but they have stolen items that they can track. They're going into these homeless encampments themselves to recover their items and getting attacked. We're seeing these viral videos everywhere. No one's doing anything. What we need to do is refocus America on doing something for those of us that pay taxes and get up and go to work every day. And that's not what we're doing. We're telling you, suck it up. Don't worry about your concerns if you're not safe, and that's insane.
What we're doing is we're trying to be too politically correct and putting a Band-Aid on cancer, and not willing to come forth with real solutions, even if it make people uncomfortable, put forth factual solutions that fixes the problems internally. Because right now, America is more concerned about what's politically correct than what's biblically correct. It's more concerned about political expediency than doing what's in the best interest of the nation. And often what is right is very unpopular.
Right.
But we think that what is popular is right. I don't think so. Remember one thing about Christ Jesus, and I like to reference him as a Muslim. Jesus didn't come into the world to be popular. He came into the world to be right. And often what's popular with the people is very unpopular with God. And that's why we got to stop seeking politicians that do what's popular, and let's hold them to accountable standard of doing what is right.
Well, as a Christian, I also like to talk about Jesus, and I'd remind many people that consider themselves Christian that they should maybe spend some more time with the New Testament and look at the actual words of Jesus, and then maybe they'd be a lot more compassionate, right? But compassion doesn't mean you have to allow yourself to be taken advantage of.
That's right.
Compassion doesn't mean that we have to let criminals get away with criminality, right? And so when you talk about Letitia James and her efforts to go after Donald Trump, I mean, as the top law enforcement officer in the state of New York, where people are underwater in victim crime, it seems like possibly her focus should be elsewhere. But as Americans generally, we need to stop deifying the super rich.
In New York,
we need to stop allowing this aristocracy.
In the state of New York, that's not politically popular. Yeah. So, but it is absolutely politically right.
I think it's coming back around.
Popular.
I think you're going to see a lot of
I'm going to tell you something. Here's where they've made a mistake. Black people, brown people, Asian people, white people, all realize that there's a serious problem with crime in America,
right,
and that crime has gotten out of control.
Right.
And all races, no matter who you are, feel unsafe.
I think
they feel
people
unsafe.
of color feel more unsafe because I think
unsafe.
They are the ones that have been abandoned the most
and what I think
in
is
high crime areas by law enforcement.
And what could happen is what happened in South Texas, where that Hispanic young woman ran as a Republican and flipped the historically Democratic
Democratic
to Republican side and won as a Republican congresswoman. And what's happening is people are sick and tired of the games. And they want to feel safe. They want to feel that economically we're safe,
it's allowing the Republicans to get away with their extremism as well. And what we need is we need a pushback to reasonability. We need a pushback to politicians talking about the concerns of that middle-class working family that can't afford gas, can't afford their home, can't afford to put food on the table, and start worrying about making communities safer. But I'm not holding my breath. But hey, one thing real quick, Quanell, and I'll let you. No one's calling us politically correct. So but maybe if people would just start listening to us.
But I will say this: the American people should do some research. Find out how many U.S. congressmen, men and women, when they went to Congress, they were not millionaires, right, and find out how fast after winning their election they became millionaires. That should tell you something right there.
I agree completely.
Who they're looking out for.
Right. It ain't us.
Who they're looking out for.
It ain't you. It ain't me. It ain't anybody but themselves.
Some of them went and within a year and a half became millionaires.
It's disgusting.